Alright, and welcome back. In this section we are going to do the functionality of the app in Java. So let's go and open the main activity class. This is located under the Java directory, and the first directory under the Java directory expanded, and that's where the main activity is. So here most of the code that we'll be writing will be inside the onCreate method. So underneath the set content view, we are going to write the basic step. We're going to break down the problem into different smaller problems, so it becomes easier to tackle the app. So the first thing that we need to do, we need to import the quotes from the string.xml file. So if I click on the string.xml file, notice that I have the quotes in one string array and I have the authors in another string array. Notice that I forgot to mention in the previous section that I need to create the same amount of authors that I have of quotes, and you'll see why in a second. So notice that I have 8 niche quotes, and I have niche repeated 8 times, and the same thing for nrand. So let's go back into main activity, and so we need to import quotes from resource strings.xml. So this is the first step that we need to do, and for the second step, we need to define the basic functionality of the app. For example, the first thing when the app opens is to generate a random quote from the quotes available. So let's say that we want to generate random quote from quotes, and so the third step will be when the user press the forward button or the next quote, we need to generate another random quote. So let's say generate random quote when next button pressed. And so another functionality is for the back button or the previous button. So generate previous, actually recall previous quote when back button press. And finally we need probably more functionality, because we need to implement the favorite quotes and the shared quotes. So let's do the share quote on social media. And finally 6 favorite quote functions. And so that's it. That's breaking the app into 6 steps, and from this we can start coding the app. So I'm going to start creating instance fields, because I need to reference all the elements in my layout, in my activity. So I'm going to create reference for those elements. So I'm going to start by saying public, and I need a text view. So I'm going to say text view, and I'm going to call this text view quote text view. So I'm going to say quote text view, and next I'm going to say public. By the way, if you do Alt Enter, it'll import the classes. So next I'm going to create image view, and this is going to be for my previous and next button, as well as these two images up here. So I'm going to say next button image view, I advise you to include the type of element you're referencing within your instance field. That way it's easier to the code becomes easier to read. So I'm going to next, I'm going to say public image view previews button image view, and finally I need two more. One is for share button image view, and the other one is for what is the other one? Share and favorite. I'm going to call this one fav button image view, and I'm going to import the classes. And so down here within the onCreate method, I'm going to create references. So I'm going to say code text view equals, and I need to cast this into a text view, and I'm going to say find user by ID, and I'm going to, inside the parentheses, I'm going to say r.id, and the R means resource. Every time I type the R, I'm looking into under the resource directory, and I'm looking for the ID of this text view, which is right here, quotes underscore text view. And so I'm going to say quotes underscore text view, and basically I need to do the same thing for these four buttons. So I'm going to copy this so the typing it's less, and I need one more. Yep. And I'm going to change this to next button image view, and change the ID into next button, and I need to change this to image view, and this one previous button, change this to, you get the idea. And I need to select the ID for previous button. I need to share button image view. And I'm going to pause here. Alright, so the next step is to import the quotes from the swing.xml file. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to say resource, and I'm going to name it res, and I'm going to say get resources, and next I'm going to create a strings array, and I'm going to call this one all authors, and I'm going to say resource get string array, and I'm going to say r array dot quotes, and that is going to store all the quotes inside the string .xml file inside the all authors array. And I'm going to import this. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing for the, actually this one should be all quotes, and I'm going to do the same thing for all authors. The string array r dot array dot authors. And so the next step, I'm going to create another class that is going to be a quote class, so it becomes easier to implement the functionality of the app to stay compliant with programming standards, I guess. So I'm going to right click on the on this folder. I'm going to say new Java class, and I'm going to create a class called quote, and I'm going to click OK. And inside here I'm going to create 3 variables. One is string, which is quote. The other one is also a string, name author. And I'm going to leave it like so. I'm going to right click and go into generate, and I'm going to select constructor, and I'm going to include the 2 string variables, and I'm also going to include getters and setters. For both instance fields. And also I'm going to say setters, both, yes. And finally I want to include a toString method, and I'm going to format this a little bit so I need the quote and followed by 2 new lines, followed by the author. And that's my quote class. So next I'm going to go into main activity, and I'm going to create a string array. So I'm going to say public an array list, I'm sorry, and I'm going to the type of array list is going to be of the quote type, and I'm going to name it quote list. And I'm going to initialize the quote list, new array list. And so next I'm going to actually what I want to do now, I want to add all the quotes and authors into my array list. So I'm going to create a method called, let's say, add to quote list, and I'm going to pass the all quotes and all authors string array, which are these 2 over here, and I'm going to populate the array, this array list. So I'm going to implement a method down here, and I'm going to say public void add to quote list, and I'm going to say string all quotes comma string all authors. And I'm going to create a for loop. I'm going to say for int I equals to 0, I less than all quotes, actually all quotes that length, I plus plus, and I'm going to say string quote equals to all quotes, actually all quotes I, and I'm going to create another string. This one is for authors, and I'm going to say all authors I. Next I'm going to create a quote object, so I'm going to say quote quote equals new quote, and I'm going to pass the author. It should be single author. There we go. It is actually quote in authors, I believe. I'm typing as fast as I can. And let's see, okay, so let's name this new quote. Okay, so next we are going to insert the quote inside the quote list array list. So I'm going to say quote list add, and I'm going to say new quote, and that is going to add everything, all the quotes and authors inside my quote list array list. And of course I want to create a comment here, and that says adding all quotes and authors to quote list array list. And so the next step is to generate a random quote when the application opens for the first time. So I'm going to generate a random number from the size of a quote list array list. So I need to create a constant. I'm going to call it but I'm actually going to declare it here because I will not be able to know the size of the quote list until I get to this step here. So I'm going to say final int, and I'm going to call it quotes length, and I'm going to say quote list that size, and that is going to give me the length. So next I want to create another variable, and this one I'm going to say public int, and I'm going to call it index, and this is going to be the random number. So I'm going to say get random quote, and I need to next implement functionality of this quote here. So I'm going to say public, I'm going to return an int, so I'm going to say get random, let's see, get random quotes, get random quote, and I'm going to pass an argument which is length, and I need to pass it here too. I'm going to call it quotes length -1. Remember, the size of the array might be 10, but we want to return an index, so we cannot return 10 as an index, so we need to subtract 1 from it. So next I'm going to say return int, and I'm going to use the random.math. Actually it is math.random, and I'm going to multiply this by length +1, and I need to put this surrounded within quotation or within parentheses, and that is going to give me a random number. And I misspelled the name of the function here, so it should be get random quote, and I'm going to add some more comma here. And so next we are ready to output the quote into the text view. So I'm going to say quote text view dot set text, and I'm going to quote list dot get index to string. And so let's go ahead and run the application, and we should be getting our first quote. So let's go ahead and bring the screencast, and let's go ahead and run the app. So I'm going to say run. Okay. And the app is installing, and it should appear right here in any moment. Okay, here we go. And so we have our first quote, and it seems to be working because in the in the XML file that we designed, we had a different quote. So we have our app working. So the next step is to implement the next button functionality. So I'm going to go into this step, and I'm going to create an event listener. So I'm going to say next button, set on click listener, and I'm going to say new view that on click listener, and I want to override the following method, which is public void on click, and this method is going to take a view, and in here I'm going to write the functionality of what's going to happen once I press the next button. So I'm going to say index. Pretty much I need to do this again, recall the random number function, and also send the quote into the text image, into the text view, I'm sorry. And next, let's go ahead and implement the recall previous quote step. So I'm going to copy this method, and I'm going to place it here, and instead of next button, I'm going to change it to previous. And I'm also going to because when we press the previous button, we can just not generate a random function. We need to find a way to push all the previous quote into a different data structure. So I'm going to go back into my instance field, and I'm going to create a stack. Actually, yes, a stack. So I'm going to say stack. I'm going to, it's also going to be of type quote, and I'm going to name it previous quotes. And I'm going to insert this, and also need to initialize it. So I'm going to initialize it somewhere up here. I'm going to say previous quotes, and I'm going to say new stack. And so next here in the previous button on click listener, I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to say quote text view set text, and I'm going to say previous quotes, and I'm going to say pop, and also need to come here in the next button. I need to say quote text, or actually previous quote, and I need to push the current quote list, get index. I need to push that into the stack, and so every time we recall the previous scene quote, we are going to look at the top of the stack, and we're going to pop that one, and we're going to continually do that. I think it's a better way. I think stack is the best choice for this sort of functionality. And I need to say toString. Okay, here we go. And also we need to implement an if condition, because the user can continue to press on the previous button or the back button, and we're going to reach the situation in which the stack no longer has anything inside. So we're going to run into an index out of bound exception, so we need to catch that. So we're going to say the previous quotes that size greater than 0, then we can continue to recall the previous quote. And also we need to catch the event in which we reach the last previous quote and the user no longer can get any quotes, so we need to display some sort of toast that advise the user to press the next random quote. So I'm going to do a null statement here, and I'm going to say toast make test, and I'm going to pass the current context, which is the main activity, this, and the second parameter is the message that we want to get to the user. So I'm going to say get new random quote, or get new quote, and let's go ahead and test the functionality. Actually, this is wrong. I need to also include the length, it's another parameter. So I'm going to say toast that length short, and here I need to say that show. And so let's go ahead and run this. I'm going to pause for a second. Alright, so I'm going to press next, and I'm getting a new quote, and I'm getting a new quote and a new quote, and so I'm going to press previous now, and the previous, I was able to recall the previous quote the second time I press the previous button, and I finally get new quote message. So the reason that I need to press the previous quote twice is because the last random quote we pushed it into the previous quote tag, and so we need to the first time we press previous quote, we actually pop in the current quote, and so we don't get to see the previous quote until we press twice. So I'm going to fix that now. I'm going to say, for example, I'm going to create another instance field. This one I'm going to call it, I'm going to set it to a boolean. I'm going to call it is previous, and I'm going to set it to false. And so whenever we get a next quote, I'm going to also set it to is previous to false. So as long as we get in the previous quote, it is set to false, and here the first time that we press the previous button, I'm going to say if previous, if not previous actually, meaning if it is false the first time we are pressing the previous button, therefore we need to pop twice that in that case. So I'm going to also make sure that, you know, previous quotes that size is bigger than 0, and here we need to do previous quotes that pop, and so we pop in the current quote that we're looking at, and then we enter in this scenario. But in this case I need to say n is previous, and here I need to set to is previous equals true, and that should do it. Okay, so on to the next step, and for this one we need to create another event listener. So I'm going to say share button image view, set on click listener, and I'm going to copy this from here. Actually, I'm going to get this one, has less code in it. And the other code is pretty much the same, so I'm going to delete this section, and instead of next image I'm going to say share button image, and I'm going to create an intent. An intent is used in Android Studio to start an activity or to send data to another activity. So I'm going to say intent send intent, and I will say new intent, and I'm going to say send intent set action intent that action underscore send, and this is going to start the on the menu in which you have the option to select the MIME application to send text. So I'm going to insert the class for intent, and finally I'm going to say send intent put extra, and I'm going to say intent dot extra text, and the second parameter is going to be the current quote. So I'm going to say quote list dot get index to string. Next I'm going to say send intent set type. The type is text MIME, so text plain, and finally start activity, send intent, and that should take care of the share functionality. And finally, let's do the favorite quote function. So here we need to implement another event listener that changes the color of the heart favorite image view to red once the user taps on this heart. So I'm going to copy the event listener, and this time I'm going to change it to fav button image view, and I'm going to change the image view from the white to red. So I'm going to say fav button image view dot set image resource, and I'm going to say R map, and I believe it's IC heart fav on, and so that'll change it to red. But we need more than that. Actually, if the user presses again and wants to change it back to white, and also if we recall the previous quote, we need to find a way that the application tells the user whether that quote is favored or not. So I'm going to go back into the quote class, and I'm going to add another instance field. This one I'm going to it is a boolean, and I'm going to call it is fav or favorite, and I'm going to implement getters and setters for this favorite. So next we need to implement the functionality for changing the favorite status. So I'm going to say if quote list get index is favorite. If it is already favorite, then we need to change it back to not favorite. So I'm going to recall this, cut here, and instead of on, I'm going to change it to off. And next we need to say quote list get index and set it back to its favorite. Actually set favorite to false. And else, this is in the case that favorite is actually false, then we set it to on, and actually here needs to be, well, no, that's fine. So here it needs to be true. Alright, so to recapitulate, we have implemented the share functionality and the favorite functionality. So let's go ahead and run the app. Hopefully we will not have any errors. By the way, it is a good way to debug or send logs into your in order to debug the application. So by the way, to the Android monitor, here you can send the login. So I'm going to ask for a new quote. Okay, so that's 2, that's 3, and I want to set this quote favorite. So I'm going to click on the favorite button. As you can see, it set it to red, and I'm going to click again to set it to off, and that seems to be working. And I'm going to share the quote on social media, so I'm going to click on the share icon, and then I have this activity coming up in order to share on let's say Twitter, and now Twitter comes up, and that is it. That is it for this video. I hope you enjoy it, and as always, remember to subscribe, and see you in the next video.